If you're not working, don't eat at our table. That's what she said, right in front of everyone. My daughter-in-law, with her perfectly lined lips and her icy stare, flung those words across the table like knives. And my son, my only child? He said nothing. He just looked down, spooning potatoes into his mouth like he hadn't heard a thing. I stood there, casserole dish still warm in my hands. The scent of thyme and roast chicken rising into the air, mingling with the bitter silence that followed her words. My hands trembled. I blinked fast, refusing to cry in front of them. Not in front of her. Not in front of the man I gave up everything for. I turned and walked away. No one followed. No one said my name. Behind the door of my room, I sank to the floor. And that's when it happened. I broke. Not loud, not dramatic. Just quiet sobs that soaked through my sleeves as I buried my face into my arms. I had been humiliated in my own home. And for what? For growing old, for no longer being useful. Let me know where you're listening from. I always love seeing how far these stories travel. And if this story speaks to you, share your thoughts below. Don't skip, because what happens at the end will surprise you more than the betrayal itself. I wasn't always this invisible. There was a time when my name meant something in this house. Back when laughter echoed in the kitchen, back when my son used to wrap his tiny arms around my waist while I cooked, asking, "What's for dinner, Mom?" He was all I had. After his father left, No vanished. When he was just 3, I never dated again. I couldn't. I was too tired from juggling jobs and chasing buses and checking homework at midnight. I worked as a receptionist during the day, cleaned offices at night, and sold handmade quilts on weekends. Every dollar I saved had a name, tuition, shoes, lunch, birthday. We weren't rich, but we had dignity. He never missed a meal. He never wore torn clothes. And I never once made him feel like he was a burden. He was smart, too. Got into college on a partial scholarship, and I covered the rest. I remember crying the day I mailed the check. Not because it hurt, but because it meant he wouldn't have to struggle like I did. That was all I ever wanted. When he brought her home the first time, I thought she was wonderful. Pretty sharp, ambitious. A nurse in training. I welcomed her. Bought her flowers. Let her stay the night even before they were married. I treated her like the daughter I never had. And when she lost her mother a year later, I was the one who held her hand at the funeral. The one who made soup and sat by her side when she didn't want to talk. I loved her because he did. That was enough for me. They got married in our backyard. I paid for the catering and the tent, and her wedding dress, though, she never told anyone. I didn't mind. I was proud. That day, I stood beside them in the photo and thought, we made it. Then the years rolled on. She became a full-time nurse. He got a job in tech. They moved back in with me to save for a house. I didn't charge rent. I gave them the master bedroom. I cooked, cleaned, watched their dog when they traveled. I thought we were still a family, but slowly the smiles faded. The thank yous became rare. Conversations shortened. Plans were made without me. My casseroles were no longer delicious, they were too salty. My advice was old-fashioned, my presence optional, and now I'm a burden. It didn't happen all at once. It happened in small, slicing silences, until that one moment at the table when her words finally said out loud what they'd all been thinking for months. If you're not working, don't eat at our table. I never thought my own son would sit quietly while someone told me I didn't belong in the home I built. But he did. It started with her smile. At first, it was warm, soft eyes, gentle dimples, the kind of smile that made you feel included. That's the smile she gave me when she first called me Mom. I remember that moment so clearly. We were baking together. I had flour on my nose, and she laughed, handed me a towel, and said, "Thanks, Mom." It was the first time. I think I held on to that moment longer than I should have, because after a while, that smile changed. It became shorter, tighter, as if it took effort, as if being nice was a job she no longer got paid for. She started calling me by my name again. Not Mom, just Margaret. She'd correct how I folded towels, rewash the dishes I'd already cleaned. I brushed it off as stress. Everyone's a little fussy when they're tired, right? But then came the sighs. Loud, passive-aggressive sighs every time I walked into a room while they were watching TV or eating late-night snacks. One night, I overheard her on the phone with her friend. She was sitting out on the porch and didn't know I was in the kitchen near the window. "No, she doesn't work anymore. She just hangs around. I mean, she's sweet, but it's like having a second dog." She laughed. So did her friend. I dropped the spoon I was holding. It clanged against the sink louder than I expected. She turned, met my eyes for a second. I didn't say a word. Neither did she. She just went back to her call like nothing happened. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept thinking she didn't even flinch. She meant it. Still, I said nothing. But that's when things began to tilt. She stopped inviting me to dinner outings. I'd find them gone on weekends. When I asked, she'd say, "Oh, we figured you'd be tired." Tired. I'd cooked their meals, folded their laundry, cleaned their bathroom, not because I was asked to, but because that's what mothers do. That's what I thought love looked like. But maybe I was wrong. I thought my son would notice, that he'd pull me aside and say, "Hey, are you okay?" But he never did. He worked late, came home quiet, sat at dinner and scrolled through his phone. He wasn't cruel. He was just absent, detached, and I didn't know how to reach him anymore. Sometimes I wondered if he saw what she saw, a woman with nothing left to offer. No paycheck, no ambition, just soft hands and old stories. I started to vanish in my own home. There was this evening, small but unforgettable. I made stew. It was a recipe passed down from my grandmother, a family favorite. I served it in the ceramic bowls I had since he was a boy. She took one bite, looked up, and said, "It's fine, but next time, maybe add more cumin. Or less. I don't know." And then she poured herself a glass of wine and turned her back. That bowl sat there, half full, cooling, forgotten, like me. After that night, something shifted, not in them, in me. I stopped trying, stopped hovering around the kitchen at dinner time, stopped texting my son to see if he wanted tea or needed help with errands. I still cooked, still folded towels, but I did it in silence. No more hoping, no more waiting to be acknowledged. And they didn't notice. Or maybe they noticed and preferred it. That was the first lesson. Sometimes silence is more comfortable than confrontation. For them, not for me. But silence is also power. I started watching more, listening, filing away every moment. The way she rolled her eyes when I asked about her day. The way he passed me by without even a glance when he came home late. The way they laughed in the living room while I sat upstairs, lights off, alone. One morning, I cleaned out my old sewing basket. Beneath the pincushion was a tiny metal box I hadn't touched in years. Inside were letters, my mother's handwriting, old bank slips, and a photo of my son at age 10. His arm slung around me, gap-toothed and grinning. He had written on the back, "Best mom ever." I sat on the floor and cried for an hour. I didn't blame her, not entirely. Life can harden people. But I blamed him. He had forgotten the woman who taught him to walk, who stood by every science fair board, who cheered from the cheap bleachers while he played basketball. He had forgotten me. That night, I made a list. Not a to-do list, a to-remember list. The down payment I contributed to their mortgage, the time I co-signed their car loan when his credit was low. The years I filed my taxes late because I paid for his tuition instead. The family heirlooms I gave her when she asked for something meaningful for their anniversary. It wasn't bitterness that made me write it down. It was clarity. If I was going to be invisible, then I needed to see myself again, even if no one else did. I started going for walks alone, taking books to the park, visiting the library downtown. I even took a free painting class at the community center. I hadn't held a brush in years. They barely noticed. One evening, they had friends over. I stayed upstairs. The laughter and music rose through the floors. I could hear her voice, bright, charming, a version of her I hadn't seen in years. Then I heard my name. "She still lives here," she said in a half whisper. "But she's quiet now, keeps to herself. It's better this way." And someone else, a woman I didn't recognize, replied, "Well, at least she's not one of those meddling mothers-in-law." The room erupted in laughter. I didn't move. I just stared at the ceiling and felt the corners of my mouth lift. Not in amusement, in decision. Because in that moment, I knew exactly what I needed to do next. Not scream, not argue, not even cry. I was done being the soft place to land. From now on, I would build something of my own in secret, in silence, and with a calm they would never see coming. A week later, I opened a bank account in my name only. I hadn't had one since I merged everything into a joint family account after retirement, trusting like always that family meant safety. But trust without protection is foolishness, and I was done being foolish. At the community center after art class, I asked around. Quietly. One of the women there, an older lady with fire in her eyes and lipstick perfectly done, told me, "You need a lawyer, sweetheart. Not for war, for dignity." So I called one, a woman named Claire. She met me at a cafe, no office visit, no pressure. Just two women and some tea. I brought my papers in a folder, trembling like a schoolgirl showing her homework. She listened without interruption. Then she said, "Margaret, you've been funding their life in silence. But you still have power. You just forgot where you put it." That night I wrote a letter I never mailed. To my son. It started like this: "If you're reading this, it means I've either left or you've finally noticed I'm gone." I told him everything. The nights I cried. The names she called me when she thought I couldn't hear. The things I gave up for him. And at the bottom of the letter, I wrote, "I forgive you." But forgiveness is not the same as forgetting. I slipped the letter into a sealed envelope and placed it behind the cookbooks on my shelf, just in case. Then I turned to my will. Claire helped me revise it. We created two versions. One where everything, my small savings, heirlooms, life insurance, went to them and the grandchildren. And another. One where every cent went to charity or was placed into a trust that they could only access through kindness, real, traceable acts of kindness. That version had a clause. One that read, "If the beneficiary is found to have emotionally abused, neglected, or financially exploited the testator, the inheritance becomes void." It wasn't revenge. It was reflection inked in legal terms. I started gathering receipts, photocopying the check I wrote for their down payment, the wire transfer from my retirement fund, the notarized agreement when I helped with the car. They'd forgotten what I'd given. But paper remembers. On my 64th birthday, they didn't plan anything, not even a cake. She made pasta, not even the kind I like, and they ate without me blaming work stress and the baby's teething. I sat outside that night, alone. A single slice of dry cake I bought myself from the corner store. And I thought, I'm done trying to be invited. I began selling things. Quietly. A few vintage figurines. Jewelry I hadn't worn since my husband left. I even listed the old upright piano on Craigslist. That brought in enough to pay off a small cabin rental deposit in another town. Just a backup, just in case. I made lists every night. Lists of what to pack, where to forward mail, who to contact. I felt something return to me in those nights, something I hadn't felt in years. Agency. They still thought I was just the quiet mother-in-law who spent her days rearranging throw pillows. Good. Let them think that, because when the time came, I wouldn't slam the door. I'd simply disappear with everything I had ever given. It came quicker than I expected. He lost his job. Tech layoffs, they said. He came home pale and quiet like someone had taken the air out of his lungs. I watched from the hallway as he sat at the kitchen table, hands folded, staring at nothing. She stood next to him, arms crossed, calculating, not panicked, not even sad, just annoyed. Within days, they started whispering in the hallway again. Doors shut, calls made. And suddenly, I was useful again. "Mom," he said one morning, avoiding my eyes. "Could you help watch the baby while we figure some stuff out?" I said yes. Of course I said yes. The baby was innocent. A chubby, drooling, joyful little thing who clapped when I sang old lullabies and squealed when I kissed her toes. She became my anchor, my reason to smile. But it didn't take long before helping became expected. I was now the full-time nanny, unpaid, unthanked, unseen. I cooked again, cleaned again. I picked up baby formula and diapers with my money. She even started sending me text messages like I was staff baby's nap at 1. "Please clean bottles. Don't let her nap too long." One evening, after a long day chasing the baby around, I fell asleep early on the couch. I woke to her voice sharp cold. "She needs to start paying for her own food. We can't afford to feed 3 adults." My heart stopped. He didn't correct her. He didn't even mumble a defense. That night, I didn't sleep. The next day, while they were out, I called Claire. "Is the trust active?" I asked. "Yes," she said. "Why just checking?" I updated the paperwork, added a stipulation: if any attempt is made to coerce the testator into unpaid labor or caretaking duties, inheritance eligibility may be revoked. Legalese cold clinical. But behind it was fire. Still I stayed. Because of the baby. One night, she cried longer than usual. I went into their room. They hadn't stirred. I picked her up, her cheeks wet and red, and rocked her in my arms. She clutched my finger like I was her lifeline, and that's when it hit me I was. Not her parents. Not really. They were busy clawing at survival. I was the one who noticed when her fever spiked. I was the one who knew her cries by sound. I was the one who kissed her bruises, who hummed her to sleep. The next morning, when they came downstairs yawning and groggy, she reached for me. Not her mother. Me. I saw the flicker in her eyes. That possessive glint. "She's getting too attached," she muttered. I said nothing, but I knew what she meant. A week later, there was an accident. Minor, thank God. The baby rolled off the couch while I stepped out to get her pacifier. She cried, had a tiny bruise on her cheek. They panicked. She screamed at me louder than ever. "You're supposed to be watching her. Do you even know what you're doing anymore?" I stood there, heart pounding, and then she said it. "You're too old for this." That was it. I didn't respond. I didn't defend myself. But I did one thing. I called the social worker from the pediatrician's office, the one who had given me her card just in case. And I told the truth. Not just about the fall. About everything. The unpaid work. The emotional neglect. The way I was being used and silenced. The woman listened. Took notes. Asked if I felt safe. I said yes. But I didn't say I felt respected. Because I didn't. Not anymore. 2 days after the social worker's visit, the tension in the house thickened like smoke. She walked around, stiffly, eyes darting, lips pressed tight. He didn't look at me at all. The baby felt it too. Her usually bright demeanor dulled, her laughter short-lived. Children know when something is wrong. They didn't confront me directly. Not at first. But the silence, it was sharp. Then one evening after dinner, she snapped. "You went too far," she hissed. "You embarrassed us." I had just finished washing the baby's bottles. My hands were still wet. She stepped closer. "How dare you talk to anyone about our family? You're lucky we even let you stay here." That word, let. I blinked slowly, wiped my hands on the dish towel, and turned to face her. "I didn't talk about your family," I said calmly. "I told the truth about mine." Her jaw clenched. "You're trying to ruin us." I tilted my head. If telling the truth ruins you, maybe it wasn't strong to begin with. That's when he walked in. He heard the last part. We locked eyes, and for the first time in years, he looked ashamed. He didn't say anything, just stood there looking at the floor like it might swallow him. She walked off muttering, slamming a cabinet on her way out. The next morning, he came to my room. Alone. "Mom?" He started, then paused. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" Before I looked at him, really looked, and saw the boy I raised buried under layers of failure and silence. "Because I was hoping you'd see me without me having to beg," I said. He sat on the edge of my bed. He looked smaller somehow. I knew she could be rough, but I didn't know it was this bad. "I just thought you were okay." I swallowed. "That's because I made sure you never saw me break." He rubbed his eyes. "I messed up. I didn't let him off the hook." "You didn't just mess up. You stood by while I was erased, again and again." He nodded, eyes glossy. "I'm sorry. I didn't cry. I didn't reach out to hug him. I had cried too many times already." "You have a choice," I said. "You can keep ignoring the damage, or you can help fix it." That day, he called Claire my lawyer. He asked what I'd protected in the trust, what I'd left behind. She told him everything with my permission. That same night, they both sat at the kitchen table. She looked like she hadn't slept. He looked broken. And I was calm. He spoke first. "We didn't realize what we were doing." "No," I corrected. "You realized. You just didn't care until someone else did." She looked up, tears in her eyes. "We're sorry. I didn't believe her. Not yet." But the apology was the first thread of something long unraveled. "I'm not staying here out of desperation," I said. "I stay because I love the baby. But that doesn't mean I'll be treated like hired help without pay or respect." He nodded. "Things will change." I nodded back. "Yes, they will. One way or another." And then I stood, placed the baby monitor on the table, and walked upstairs. I had set the terms. Now, they had to live up to them. The house changed after that night, but not overnight. Apologies are easy. Patterns are harder. The next morning, she made me tea. Weak, lukewarm. She didn't say anything, just placed it on the table and walked away. It wasn't kindness. It was obligation. Or guilt. But it was something. A beginning, maybe. He started taking the baby in the mornings so I could sleep in. He cooked a few dinners, though I could tell it was a struggle. He wasn't used to being useful in that way. There were awkward silences, tense glances. But also effort, uneven, inconsistent, but real. I stayed detached. Not cold, not cruel, but observant. I wasn't looking for perfection. I was looking for sincerity. I stopped folding their laundry. I no longer asked if they needed anything from the store. I set boundaries, firm, simple ones. I'm not available after 8 p.m. No, I won't babysit every day. I'm going out. You'll have to manage dinner. And when they tested those limits, and they did, I simply repeated myself. Not with anger, with resolve. That's the thing about reclaiming your dignity. You don't have to shout anymore. You just stop bending. They began to ask me questions again. Not orders, not instructions. Just questions. Do you want to come with us to the park? Would you like to help plan her birthday? It wasn't perfect, but I could breathe again. I resumed my painting classes, took a bus to the museum, made a friend at the community garden, an older man named Jim, who liked to hum while he worked the soil. And for the first time in years, I started smiling for no reason. But it wasn't just peace I was building. It was proof. I gave Claire updates regularly. She suggested I keep a small journal, a log, really not to use against them, but to protect myself. I wrote down what changed and what didn't. She still had her moments, passive-aggressive jabs, controlling gestures. But they were fewer, less venomous. He tried harder, slower to anger, quicker to help. And the baby. She grew more attached than ever. When I walked into a room, she lit up, said Graham before she even said Dada. That little girl saved me in ways her parents never could. I wrote a new letter. Not to my son this time. To the baby. I sealed it in an envelope and wrote on the front, to be opened on your 18th birthday. Inside, I told her everything. About the woman I was before I became invisible. About the strength it takes to stay silent and the courage it takes to stop. I ended the letter with these words. You come from women who endure, but may you never have to. I placed the letter in my jewelry box beside the locket my own mother gave me. Weeks passed, then months, and one day he came to me with trembling hands. Mom, he said, we want to offer you the house. I blinked. What we want to sign it over. Put it in your name. You deserve security. You built this place. We wouldn't have it without you. I stared at him. No, I said quietly. He looked stunned. You don't buy back respect. You earn it, day by day. He nodded slowly. And that was enough. Not a house, just honesty, just truth. That night I slept with the windows open. Let the breeze in. Let the past go. I was no longer surviving. I was living. Her birthday came quietly that year. No party, no decorations. Just a store-bought cake and 2 candles that drooped slightly under the summer heat. They asked if I'd come downstairs to celebrate. I said yes. I didn't dress up. I didn't bake anything. I didn't offer to take pictures or cut slices. I just showed up present, but no longer performing. The baby, now a toddler, ran to me as soon as I stepped into the room, wrapped her arms around my leg like I was her anchor. Graham, she squealed. That alone was worth it. We all sat at the table, her parents smiling too wide, like people trying to smooth over a history they had finally begun to understand. After the candles were blown out and the baby clapped with chocolate on her cheeks, I stood up. Before we finish, I said, reaching into my bag, I want to share something. They looked at me unsure. I pulled out an envelope, thick white, sealed with a wax stamp I had kept for special letters. I handed it to my son. He hesitated. What is this? My final will. His face paled. Hers went still. You're not, he started. I'm healthy, I said calmly. This isn't about death, it's about dignity. He slowly opened the envelope and unfolded the papers inside. 3 pages, clear, concise, and signed by a notary. Everything, my accounts, my investments, even my modest life insurance, was now split 3 ways. 1 part to a children's literacy fund, 1 part to a women's shelter in the city, and the final part, a trust to be released only to my granddaughter when she turned 21, with a specific clause Accessible only if she completes 1 full year of community service in her name. No money for him, none for her. Unless there's a secondary clause, I said, that allows the trust to be amended. He looked up. Amended how kindness, I said. Real consistent, measurable kindness. You live it, not pretend it, and I'll revise it. If not, the papers stand. She swallowed hard. This is cruel. No, I replied, what was done to me was cruel. This is accountability. The room went silent. The baby babbled softly, licking frosting off her fingers. I bent down to her level, kissed her forehead, and whispered, You're the reason I stayed. Then I stood, walked back upstairs, and left them sitting there, not in anger, but in silence, letting them feel the weight of what years of quiet harm had built. That night, I slept soundly. No guilt, no wondering if I was too harsh, because for the first time I had spoken without trembling, and they had heard me. Whether they would listen, that was now up to them. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of something burning. I rushed downstairs and found him in the kitchen, surrounded by smoke, waving a towel in the air like a man in distress. The toast was black, the eggs were rubber, and the coffee pot had overflowed. He looked up at me sheepishly. I was trying to make you breakfast? I raised an eyebrow. Is that what that was? We both laughed. Not a big laugh, a small one like cracking open a window after a storm. She walked in moments later, holding the baby hair messy, no makeup, no performance. Just real. I made tea, she said. The way you like it. I took the mug. It wasn't perfect, still a little weak, but warmer than the last time. We didn't talk about the will, not that day, but they started to act differently. He asked me questions about my life before him, my childhood, my dreams. It was the first time he'd asked about me in years. She joined me in the garden, watched as I dug my hands into the soil, asked about tomatoes, asked if I'd teach her. She stumbled through it, but she asked. It was slow, uneven, but it was beginning. Claire called that week, checking in. You ready to update the trust, she asked. Not yet, I said. But I see a path now. I started setting new rituals. Every Sunday, I left the house at noon, no explanations. I went to the library sometimes, the park, sometimes nowhere in particular. Just out, just on my own time. And every Sunday when I returned, there was something waiting. One week, fresh flowers on the table. The next, a new recipe he'd tried badly, but with effort. Once a handwritten note from her. Thank you for not giving up on us. We're trying. I didn't respond. Not yet, but I didn't leave either. The baby began speaking in full sentences, tiny ones. She called me Grammy now, and when she drew stick figures, I was always in the center. One night, I tucked her into bed while they stood at the door. Do you want to read her tonight? I asked, looking at them. They looked surprised, then grateful. She sat beside the crib and opened a book. He stood awkwardly behind her. I stepped back and watched from the hallway. Her voice was soft. He laughed at the wrong part. The baby clapped. It was messy. It was perfect. Later, as I walked past their bedroom, I overheard them talking. She scares me, she whispered. Why, he asked. Because she sees through me. A pause. She's the only one who ever did. I kept walking. I didn't need to be feared. I just needed to be seen. That night, I pulled out the original will. The harsh one. The one I wrote when I was invisible and furious. I tore it in half. Then I wrote a new one. Still protective. Still principled. But this time, with room. Room for change. Room for grace. Room for them. If and only if they continued to earn it. I didn't tell them. Not yet. Because I wanted to see if they would keep trying. Even when they thought no one was watching. Months passed, and the rhythm of the house changed again. This time slower, less tension, fewer sharp edges. I began to see something in them I hadn't seen in years: humility. Not the dramatic kind with tears and grand apologies, but the quiet kind that shows up in how someone brings you a cup of tea without being asked, or how they say thank you without expecting praise. She stopped barking orders. He stopped disappearing into silence. And I started letting down my guard. I didn't erase the past, but I made space for the present. Then one rainy afternoon, there was a knock at my bedroom door. It was him, holding something in his hands, a photograph aged and slightly wrinkled. "I found this in the garage," he said. "Thought maybe you'd want it." It was a photo of me and him. I was young, holding his hand, smiling at the camera like the world had given me everything I'd ever need. "You were always happiest when you looked at me like that," he said, voice low. I nodded, "Because I believed I hadn't failed you." "You didn't," he whispered. "I failed you?" We sat in silence for a while. Then he asked something I didn't expect. "Would you come with us to visit her mother's grave?" I blinked. "Your wife's." He nodded. "She wants to take the baby, says she's ready to talk to her mom about everything." I hesitated. "Are you sure she wants me there?" "She does," he said. "She told me. She doesn't know how to say sorry to a ghost, but she knows how to say it to someone real." That weekend we drove to the cemetery. It was quiet, gray clouds overhead, the kind of silence that presses on your chest. She carried the baby. I carried the umbrella. We stood in front of the headstone, reading the name carved in stone. She stepped forward and knelt. "I miss you," she said, "and I'm sorry. For everything." The baby placed a flower on the ground. It was crooked and half wilted, but somehow perfect. Then she turned to me. "I treated you like something disposable, because I didn't know what to do with my pain." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Sometimes acknowledgement is enough. We went home in silence. That night, she handed me a small envelope. Inside was a card. On the front, in delicate gold lettering, it read, "Thank you for staying." And inside, just one line, "You were never a burden. I just didn't know how to share a home." I didn't cry. Not then. But I put the card in the drawer beside my granddaughter's letter. 2 nights later, the baby ran into my room clutching a crayon drawing. It was me, her, and 2 stick figures holding hands. "Mommy says this is our family," she said proudly. "All of us." I took the drawing and looked at her. "Is it okay if I add one more?" I asked. She nodded, so I drew a small sun in the corner. Bright glowing. She laughed. "That's you, Grammy." And in that moment I knew not everything heals, but some things grow anyway, even in the cracks, even after fire, even after being told you're too old, too quiet, too much in the way. Because I was still here. And now, they saw me. The first time she called me mom again, it caught me off guard. It wasn't in a moment of tension or apology. It was casual. A quiet Tuesday evening, we were folding laundry together. The baby was napping. The house was peaceful. She picked up one of the baby's tiny socks, smiled faintly, and said, "Mom, do you think this will fit her next month?" I froze. She didn't look up, didn't make it dramatic. Just kept folding, but I heard it, and I held on to it like a thread of fabric too precious to toss. Later that week, he brought home groceries, things he remembered I liked. Yogurt with fruit, the herbal tea I used to drink before bed, the specific type of oatmeal I hadn't bought in years because no one else ate it. Small things. But kindness always starts small. I didn't reward them with immediate softness. I'd done that before, and it cost me years of erosion. This time, I let them rebuild. Brick by brick, quietly. One evening, I walked past their room. The baby had woken up crying. I heard him whispering to her, gently rocking her. "It's okay, baby girl. Grammy's here. She loves you so much." That night I cried, but it wasn't the breaking kind. It was the kind of crying that comes when your heart finally exhales. He came to me the next morning. "Mom, we're selling the house." I blinked. "What, we've been talking? We want to start fresh, but we want to buy something smaller and give you something of your own." I stared at him. "You don't owe me anything." He shook his head. "Maybe not, but we owe it anyway," she added quietly. "We thought we were building a family, but really, we were erasing you from it. We want to fix that." They offered to buy me a small cottage near town, quiet, peaceful, with a garden and a porch swing. I visited it, touched the walls, looked out the window, felt the stillness. It was beautiful. But I said no, not because I was ungrateful, but because I no longer needed space to escape. I already had something more valuable, my space within the family. "I don't need a separate house," I told them. "I just need a separate self." They understood, and so I stayed. But under new terms, we drew boundaries together, made schedules, divided chores. They began paying a fair share for my time with the baby. I didn't ask, they offered. And I said yes. Because respect that isn't mutual isn't respect at all. She started calling me more often, even just to ask how my painting was going. He'd sit with me during news hour and talk about politics like he used to when he was younger. We became people again. Not just roles, not just mother, wife, caretaker, grandmother, but humans, with layers, with needs, with value. I updated the will once more. This time, I included a note at the beginning. This document reflects not who people once were, but who they chose to become. The trust remained, but now with a clause added: if love is shown consistently, and not just in moments of crisis, the beneficiary may be granted early access to this trust at the testator's sole discretion. In plain language, keep showing up, and you'll earn back what you nearly lost. They didn't ask what the paper said. I didn't tell them. I didn't need to. Because for the first time in years, I had something more powerful than money, more lasting than approval. I had agency, and they had respect. And all of us, we had something fragile, something bruised, but alive. We had a family. The last time she raised her voice at me, it ended differently. It wasn't sharp or cruel, but she was frustrated, juggling work calls, baby crying, dinner burning. I had just come home from my painting class, humming, carrying a canvas still wet at the edges. "Could you have at least called?" she snapped. "We didn't know where you were." I looked at her. Calm, steady. "I don't answer to anyone anymore," I said gently. "But I still care about you. That hasn't changed." She exhaled the heat of the moment, evaporating like steam off boiling water. "I'm sorry," she muttered. "I'm still learning." And for the first time, I believed her. Because the difference wasn't just in the apology. It was in the pause before she gave it. She was learning. He was too. Sometimes I'd come downstairs and find him playing piano with the baby, that same old upright they once wanted to throw out. Now he played it like it meant something. Like I meant something. She started putting my paintings up in the hallway, framing them, bragging to guests. "My mother-in-law painted that." My granddaughter, now 3, would point and say, "Grammy made it," like I was the artist of the century. At night, I'd sit on the back porch with my tea blanket over my lap and think about the path that got me here. The humiliation, the silence, the betrayal, but also the healing. I didn't become powerful by screaming. I became powerful the moment I remembered I had a choice: to stay silent or speak, to fold or rise, to vanish or reappear. And I chose to reappear on my terms. Now, when we sit at the table, I don't wait to be served. I bring my own plate, and sometimes I serve them too, but not from obligation. From generosity, from strength. One Sunday, we were all gathered for lunch. The table was full laughter conversation, the baby scribbling with crayons. She turned to me out of nowhere and said, "I hope I grow into the kind of woman you are." I nearly dropped my fork, but I smiled instead. "You still can?" I said. "Every day's a chance." She reached for my hand across the table. I let her. My son poured me a glass of water without being asked, and the baby handed me a crayon, drawing another stick figure family. This time, I wasn't in the middle. I was standing slightly to the side, holding the sun. The caption, messy backward letters read, "Grammy is the light." And maybe that's what I had become. Not the center, not the burden, but the quiet warmth that lit everything around me. And when they passed the bread this time, she offered it to me first, with both hands.